What if tomorrow's World Cup final is not really asking whether Lionel Messi can still be number one? What if it is asking whether a life path one has reached the exact kind of night that allows a great story to become complete? The final between Argentina and Spain is scheduled for July 19th, 2026. If we add every digit in that complete date, we get 27. 2 plus 7 gives 9. In numerology, 9 is the number of completion, release, culmination, farewell, emotional closure, and the final page of a cycle that can no longer stay open forever. Now, place that 9 beside Lionel Messi. Messi was born on June 24th, 1987. Add every digit in his birth date, and you get 37. 3 plus 7 gives 10. 1 plus 0 gives 1. Messi is a life path 1. That means tomorrow's final does not only place a legendary player in front of one more trophy, it places a number 1 inside a number 9 atmosphere. And that combination may explain why this match feels so heavy even before kickoff. Tonight, I want to focus only on Messi and ask a narrower question than the broader Argentina versus Spain debate. Why does Messi's personal numerology fit this specific final so naturally? This is symbolic storytelling, not science or betting advice. Football still belongs to tactics, fitness, pressure, mistakes, refereeing, substitutions, courage, and all the human things that no symbolic system can control. But numerology can sometimes explain why a match feels larger than sport before the ball even starts moving. And this final has exactly that kind of aura. Let us begin with the number 1. In numerology, 1 is the pioneer. It is the first step, the first flag in new territory, the figure who is required to lead rather than follow. 1 does not wait for permission. 1 defines the road by walking it first. It is ambition, independence, identity, authorship, and the lonely pressure of being expected to go where nobody else has gone yet. That sounds glamorous on the surface, but 1 is actually a burden number. The 1 does not get to disappear into the crowd. If things go well, people say the 1 proved why it belonged in front. If things go badly, people ask why the 1 failed to carry the standard. The 1 lives in public judgment. That is almost a perfect description of Messi's adult life. For years, the world did not merely watch him play football. It used him as evidence in arguments about greatness, destiny, legacy, and the meaning of number 1 itself. Every trophy became proof in one direction. Every defeat became proof in the other. His talent was never allowed to remain private. It was turned into a public trial about first place. That is what a life path 1 often feels like when it reaches the highest level. The gift and the burden are the same thing. You are built to stand in front, but standing in front means the whole world can measure you more harshly than it measures everyone behind you. And Messi did not live that pattern for 1 season or 2. He lived it across an era. That is important because not everyone looks the same at every stage of life. A young 1 often feels like ignition. It wants a beginning. It wants to announce itself. It wants to break into view. An older 1 can feel very different. It can start asking whether all that leadership, all that pressure, and all that public identity are about to reach a final form. That is where tomorrow's number 9 matters so much. 9 is not the number of announcement. 9 is the number of completion. It is the last single digit. It gathers everything that came before it and asks what the story was really building toward. 9 is what makes an event feel like a chapter closing, a circle sealing, a farewell becoming meaningful, or a long pattern finally turning into something the public can understand as a whole. So when a life path 1 enters a date that reduces to 9, the symbolism changes. This is no longer the 1 trying to prove it exists. This is the 1 being placed inside the room of final meaning. That is one reason this final feels more emotionally aligned with Messi than with the idea of a completely fresh takeover. Messi does not enter the match as a player still searching for identity. He enters it as a player whose identity has already been written in giant letters across modern football. The question is no longer who he is. The question is what kind of ending his public story is about to receive. And Nine loves that kind of question. Nine does not care only about talent. Nine cares about completed meaning. It asks whether the audience is ready to stop watching a player as an ongoing argument and start watching him as a nearly finished text. That is where Messi and the final begin to mirror each other. A World Cup final is already an ending machine. Careers bend toward it. Nations pour memory into it. Legends become clearer or more complicated. Because of it, young players can enter history through it. Older players can leave history through it. The whole event compresses years of narrative into one visible occasion. Now, add a full date 9 on top of that. Suddenly, the final no longer feels like a simple contest for a cup. It starts feeling like a verdict about which story is most ready to become complete. Messi's Life Path 1 is unusually strong inside that kind of container. Why? Because 1 is the number of authorship, and 9 is the number of completion. Put them together, and you get the feeling of a person being invited to sign the final page of his own mythology. That does not automatically mean he wins, but it does mean the emotional gravity of the night leans toward his kind of story. There is another layer in Messi's chart that deepens this reading. He was born on the 24th, and 2 plus 4 gives 6. 6 is responsibility, duty, care, loyalty, and the pressure of carrying collective feeling. 6 is not only about personal excellence. It is about obligation to others. That matters because Messi was never treated like a purely individual superstar. His career was constantly tied to national emotion, public longing, and the collective memory of millions of people who wanted him not only to shine, but to deliver meaning for them. That is very 6. The public did not merely admire his artistry. It leaned on him. So inside Messi's chart, we do not just have a 1. We have a 1 carrying a 6. The pioneer is also the carrier. The leader is also the bearer of other people's hopes. That combination is one reason his late career moments feel so emotionally dense. When he steps into a final, viewers are not only asking whether an individual genius can still perform. They are asking whether a long emotional debt between a player and the public is about to settle. And once again, that is 9 language. 9 wants settlement. 9 wants emotional accounting. 9 wants the old story to receive its full weight before the next story takes over the room. Messi's chart also contains a 3. If we add his birth month and day together, 6 plus 24 gives 30, and 30 reduces to 3. 3 is expression, beauty, image, creativity, timing, and the ability to turn tension into something memorable rather than merely forceful. That is one of the most recognizable traits in Messi's public mythology. Even under pressure, his greatness often becomes visible through elegance rather than violence. He does not need every action to look explosive. Sometimes one pass, one pause, one touch, or one unexpected angle says more than a whole sequence of louder actions. That is a very 3-like way of changing a match. And tomorrow, the 3 matters again. Messi enters the final at 39 years old, and 39 reduces to 3. His personal day for July 19th, 2026 also reduces to 3. So inside the heavy 9 atmosphere, his chart keeps echoing back to the number of expression and image. This is a subtle but powerful point. If Messi ends up defining the final, the numerology does not necessarily suggest 90 minutes of overwhelming physical domination. It suggests something more cinematic, a decisive picture, a beautifully timed act, a pass that suddenly seems larger than its difficulty, a free kick, a calm finish, a single gesture that turns the whole night into an image the audience can carry for years. That is what happens when a 1 enters a 9 through repeated 3s. The pioneer does not only seek result, he seeks a final, recognizable image. That makes the reading feel less like brute prediction and more like narrative architecture. The numbers are not saying Messi must stampede the future. They are saying the match may be structured to give his story one more meaningful scene. Now, let us add one more important cycle number. Messi's personal year for 2026 reduces to 4. For his structure, work, responsibility, foundation, discipline, and the need to convert long effort into something real and stable. For his not wild expansion energy, it is not youthful experimentation. It is not chaos. It is a building number. It wants things finished properly. This may be one of the most underrated parts of the whole reading. If Messi were entering this final in a 1 year, the symbolism would feel more like self-reinvention or a fresh, personal beginning. If he were entering it in a 5 year, the feeling would be wilder, less settled, more open to disruption. But he enters it in a 4 year. That means the background rhythm of his 2026 cycle is responsibility and completion through structure. Then the full date adds 9. Then the match day personal current returns to 3. So what do we get? We get a 1 identity, a 4 year, a 3 day, and a 9 environment. The leader, the builder, the image maker, inside the closing room. That is an extraordinarily coherent symbolic pattern for a veteran icon approaching a final chapter. And it is one of the clearest reasons I do not read this match as a pure youth coronation date, even though the future pressure around Spain and Yamal is very real. Yamal absolutely represents emergence. He absolutely represents the feeling that the next era is not waiting politely outside the door anymore. But the complete date still reduces to 9, and 9 wants the old story to be counted fully before the new story becomes total. That does not mean the future is absent. It means the future is entering through a closing gate rather than an open field. And that distinction favors Messi's symbolic role. A lot of people misunderstand number 1 by treating it as permanent youthful hunger. But mature ones are different. After decades of pressure, the one often stops asking, "Can I rise?" and starts asking, "What did all this rising mean?" That second question is much closer to 9 than to 1. It is reflective. It is summative. It is almost historical. That is exactly where Messi lives now in the public imagination. People are not just watching him as a current player. They are watching him as a moving archive. Every touch gets compared to old touches. Every camera angle carries memory. Every quiet moment feels like part of a larger text about time, greatness, and closure. 9 amplifies that kind of audience behavior. It encourages people to interpret the present moment through the full weight of what came before it. That is why even small, messy moments in a number 9 final may feel huge. A glance toward the crowd, a pause before a set piece, a simple pass released at exactly the right second, under a lighter date, those could remain details. Under 9, they can become symbols because the public is already searching for summary. 9 makes the audience want summary. That may be the simplest sentence in the entire episode. And Messi is exactly the kind of player whose career invites summary. There is also the team layer. Argentina reduces to 44 and then to 8. July 19th, taken as month plus day, also reduces to 8. 8 is power, consequence, possession, authority, and the visible object at the end of the struggle. In a final, 8 looks like the trophy itself. So if we place Messi's personal chart inside Argentina's team number and the match date, the pattern gets even more interesting. Messi brings 1, 6, 3, and 4. Argentina brings 8. The full date brings 9. That means the reading around him is not isolated. It is supported by the wider stage. The team carries trophy energy. The date carries completion energy. Messi carries authorship, duty, and expressive timing. That is why the entire symbolic structure keeps bending toward the same emotional conclusion. If the old order is going to receive one more coherent public image, this is the kind of night on which it would happen. Notice what is not being claimed here. I am not saying the numbers erase Spain. I am not saying youth has no claim. I am not saying a great final can only belong to one narrative. In fact, part of what makes this final so compelling is that 2 truths can exist at once. Spain and Yamal can embody the future. Messi and Argentina can still embody the emotional center of completion. The future can be felt before it is fully installed. That is one of the deepest meanings of nine. It lets us sense what comes next while still demanding that the previous chapter receive its proper ending. That is why this episode is not really about whether Messi is stronger, faster, or more likely to dominate possession than younger players around him. It is about fit. It is about symbolic fit. Does his story fit this date? And the answer, to me, is yes, unusually well. Messi as Life Path one is not merely another star entering another final. He is one of the clearest modern examples of a person whose public identity has always revolved around the burden of first place. Tomorrow's date does not ask, who is beginning? It asks, which great story is ready to be sealed with meaning? That question belongs naturally to him. This is also why I think the final may feel emotionally heavier around Messi than around anyone else, even if Spain's younger energy produces terrifying stretches of football. The weight of the cameras, the commentary, the crowd memory, and the symbolic expectation may keep returning to Messi because he is the figure most easily read as a long arc approaching form. That does not guarantee a happy ending. Nine can close through triumph. Nine can also close through harsh transition. But even in harsher versions, nine still insists on closure. It still says that something large is reaching its edge. So if Messi loses, the match can still behave like a nine by turning the night into a public recognition that one era has fully passed. If he wins, the nine becomes cleaner and warmer because the closing image and the visible result move together. In both cases, the final behaves like an ending night first. That is why the one inside the nine matters so much. The one wants identity. The nine wants meaning. Messi already has identity. So tomorrow's question becomes meaning. What kind of final meaning will his story receive? Once you frame the match that way, even the football starts looking different. You stop watching only for volume and speed. You start watching for moments that feel conclusive, moments that look like they belong in a documentary ending, moments that summarize more than they explain. That is the lens I would bring into the final. Watch whether Messi seems surrounded by memory rather than merely pressure. Watch whether the cameras keep treating him like the center of a closing chapter. Watch whether the decisive image, if it comes, looks expressive rather than chaotic. Watch whether the match seems to ask the public for gratitude, closure, and one final understanding of what this era meant. Those are all nine type signals, and they sit beautifully beside a life path one that has spent decades carrying the burden of being measured against the very top of the sport. There is one more emotional nuance I do not want to miss. Nine is often described as an ending number, but that can sound cold if we say it too quickly. In reality, nine often carries compassion and dignity as well. It does not simply shut the door. It looks back before it closes the door. It recognizes value before release. That tone also feels extremely close to the way audiences relate to Messi at this stage of his career. People do not watch him only with hunger anymore. They watch him with reverence. That is a nine emotion. It makes the crowd want to witness, not merely consume. It makes the match feel ceremonial even before anything decisive has happened. And when reverence surrounds a life path one, the number one stops looking like raw ambition and starts looking like fulfilled stature. That is the deepest core of the reading. Messi's numerology in this final does not feel like unfinished ascent. It feels like fulfilled stature being offered one more meaningful frame. That does not mean the frame will be perfect. It means the frame will matter. So let us answer the central question directly. Why does Messi's life path, one fit tomorrow's World Cup final so naturally? Because one is the number of the public leader, the first name, the burdened identity, and the person whose story must stand at the front. Because nine is the number of completion, release, closure, and the final emotional meaning of a long cycle. Because Messi's supporting numbers add duty, image, and mature structure rather than reckless disruption. Because Argentina's team number and the matchday 8 both strengthen the material trophy side of the story. And because the public already watches Messi as a figure whose present is inseparable from memory. All of that makes him an unusually natural protagonist for a number 9 final. If you want the shortest possible version, it is this. Messi does not arrive at this final asking to become somebody. He arrives asking what his already great story is about to become in its closing language. That is a 9 question, and that is why the date keeps pulling me back toward him. So, my E05 reading is not that numerology can guarantee Messi another crown. My E05 reading is that the symbolic environment of July 19th, 2026 is far more hospitable to a completed, messy chapter than to a completely detached, fresh beginning. The future may still flash, threaten, and even seize the match. But the emotional grammar of the night still leans toward closure, legacy, and one more image that makes the old story feel whole. That is why Messi's life path, one matters so much here. Not because one always wins, but because some nights are built to ask whether the one has finally reached the exact ending worthy of everything it spent years carrying. Tomorrow feels like one of those nights. You can leave your own reading in the comments, but there is no need to force every movement into prophecy. Sometimes numerology is most useful when it helps us recognize the emotional shape of a moment before the moment arrives. If the final truly behaves like a 9, then what we may be watching is not only a match for a trophy, but a final test of how history chooses to close one of football's greatest living chapters. Thank you for spending this time with Hidden Number Files, and take care until we meet again.